Hello everyone, this is Mohit Jotwani from DataTorrent. Well, firstly, welcome everyone to another of these webinar session that we have been conducting for the past month or so. So this is another webinar in this series, and today we'll talk about some business scenarios of deduplication of data. We're just wondering if you could just wait for a few more minutes so some other people could join. I guess I'll just start with this session. So you would see a questions panel on your board. So if at any point in time you have any question, please do write your question on the panel, and across the session we will take these questions. I hope everybody is able to hear me properly. If anybody is facing any issues, please write something on the question panel. Okay, seems like it. So I'm audible to everyone. So the agenda of today's session, so we'll look at an overview of the enterprise offering of DataTorrent, which is the RTS or the real-time streaming solution, which is powered by Apache Apex. We look at the application hub and the app templates that we'll be looking at in today's session. Then we do a little bit of overview of the Dedup Operator, which is part of the Malhar library, and what is the utilization of the deduplication of data, and then we look at some of the business cases from the actual industry. We then talk about why exactly one should look at DataTorrent RTS, and at the end I can take most of the questions, but we'll try and answer questions as we go across this particular session. So if you're able to see my next screen, which is the DataTorrent RTS overview. So this is practically the block diagram where at the lower layer, it could be a physical, virtual, or a cloud environment. So you could be on-premise, you could be on a virtual environment as such, or you could have a cloud setup of a Hadoop cluster. So if you look at the next layer, so what we basically need is yarn. So Apache Apex, which is the next layer, which says a streaming runtime engine, is a yarn application. So we require yarn. So any distro of Hadoop, which could be Cloudera, Hortonworks, Pivotal, Mapper, or even vanilla Hadoop from the Apache ecosystem, is absolutely fine as long as it is 2.2 plus. Which comes with yarn as the resource scheduler. So we rely on yarn to provide us the containers for the processing and the memory as such. On top of it is our engine, which is highly performant, which has got built-in fault tolerance, fairly complex in-memory processing that we do of the entire data that kind of is streamed through the pipeline that is built through the next layer that you see, which is the open source operators called Malhar. So these two layers, the streaming runtime and the layer above, Apex Malhar, these are part of the Apache Apex project. So this project started, so we went open source last year around in July in 2015, and late April 2016, this became a top level project. So in the ecosystem, this has garnered a lot of interest. People have been using it exclusively. You could visit our Apache site to see which are the organizations which are powered by Apex. So this entire engine has been written in Java. So you could think of it as a single-threaded Java programming. And these operators are basically logical functions that you would normally see in terms of a pipeline where one would read data from different sources, apply some kind of validation parsing to it, and some transformation and some other custom logic that you might want to apply to your data. So you can build your own operator and contribute to this particular library and build what we call a directed acyclic graph. So these two layers are the open source component which come under the Apex logo. Now, the topmost layer is part of the enterprise offering, which is the RTS. So there is the management console, there is a data visualization dashboard, and there is a beta version of graphical application design and launch part where you can drag and drop some of these operators and create this pipeline. And on the right hand side, you'll see there's a REST API, which allows our engine to basically integrate with any application which might exist in the ecosystem. So Apex can easily coexist with any application that you could think of over on Hadoop. So basically what we need is Hadoop 2.2 plus for the sourcing capabilities of Yarn. Now, this is the operator library, which is the Malhar library. These are all open source operators, basically single-threaded Java programming operators present. So for different kind of data sources, it could be a messaging system like Kafka, NoSQL stores like Cassandra, HBase, any kind of file system, HDFS or NFS, any kind of parser that you could think of, XML, JSON, CSV, or basic transformation that you could think of filters, applying rules for expressions. Dedup is what we'll look into a little bit of detail today. Any kind of dimensional computation that you could think of, any kind of WebSocket based reading of data, and other things such as Elasticsearch. So these are some 300, 400 odd operators, and there are around 50, 60 operators which are practically you could take this into a production environment. So we have some other sessions that we have conducted in the past which talk about these development of pipeline or Apex in detail. I would welcome everyone to actually look at these resources. There are videos on YouTube, there are slides on SlideShare, which will give you more idea of how an application can be built over Apex. So the engine is capable of looking into any kind of solution which is a streaming solution or a batch solution. So in the recent most version of our enterprise, which is DataTorrent RTS 3.6, we have launched something called the AppHub. These are basically application templates that we are providing as part of the AppHub. And these templates are also available on our website, datatorrent.com. Please feel free to visit our website. You could download these templates from either our website, or you could actually download RTS 3.6. There's an evaluation period of 90 days. So when you click on this AppHub, you will see these templates. So I'm particularly focusing on this Kafka ETL, Kafka to HDFS filter app, and there are many more over there, which are basically ingestion templates where a user just has to configure the properties of these operators. And these operators, what we just saw as part of the operator library, have been taken from Malhar. So the GitHub repository is given, the source code is available. There are certain examples as well and documentation available, which will help you out in taking any of these app templates, and you could customize it further as per your need and launch it on your Hadoop cluster. So this particular Kafka ETL template, what it does is, so what you're seeing, if you look at this particular screen, at the bottom of the screen is what we call a logical DAG. This is the directed acyclic graph. So here we are reading from a Kafka input connector, or other client if you would want to look at it from a Kafka perspective, which is reading data of different topics. It's providing this data over a stream to a CSV parser, and the parser then parses this data, converts into a plain old Java object, passes through the filter, and it goes through a transform. In the transform, you could actually apply your expressions, Java expressions, to transform the data, read data from external sources as well, or transform as per your need. And then there's a formatter, and then it ultimately writes the data to HDFS. So this entire thing is run over our enterprise offering of Apex, which is the RTS, which has got built-in fault tolerance and scalability. We'll talk about it at a later stage during this session. Now, in terms of the deduplication of data, there is another operator called dedup. So this is what we'll talk about in this particular session. So please keep this ETL in mind, what we saw just before this slide. So what we'll do is we'll actually introduce this dedup operator in this particular ETL, and we'll see that. So, and the dedup operator, what basically it does is it looks at data which is coming from the upstream operator. So let's say in this scenario, let's say the CSV parser or maybe a transform data is being sent to the dedup operator. What it does is it asynchronously does a lookup, and there is a storage called managed state, which is part of the Apex engine as such, part of Malhar as such. And you can actually do two types of deduplication. There is a basic version of deduplication, which is basically meant for bounded data, and there is another deduplication which is for unbounded data or streaming data, where we actually ask the user to configure an expiry period and an expiry key in addition to a key based on which the deduplication would happen. So imagine a number of data records which we call as tuple are flowing in through this stream and coming to this dedup operator. So what this dedup operator does is it actually based on the key expression that a user has configured. Now that could be a combination of multiple fields that is coming in a single tuple. That combination can be used to identify a unique record. So that unique key is then stored as part of the managed state. And some of it is actually an in-memory cache, and some of it after there's a bucket manager concept. So we keep these data into buckets, and some of it is filled to HDFS. So the dedup operator then asynchronously continues to look up for these key for the next set of data that comes in, depending upon whether the deduplication is happening for a basic dedup or for an expiry period. We'll look at it at the next slide. And in the emit side, you'll see there are 3 ports. So on one of the port, we send out the unique record. On the other, we send out the duplicate record. And we'll see the other port where we send out the expired record. So there's a concept of expiry in this. So this is what I was just mentioning. So the 2 types of deduplication of data. One is for bounded data sets. So this is for a scenario. So this could be like a batch kind of scenario where you know that there's a limited set of data, or you're aware there's a small set of data where there is no expiry required for the data that is coming in. In this scenario, what happens is, so let's say the tuple arrives at the deduper from the data stream. Then the deduper would check for the time boundaries, depending whether it's a time-based dedup or not. And then asynchronously, it looks in the managed state for that particular key. It receives the looked up results from the managed state, which is written in Apex as such. And depending upon the identification of the key, it either emits that particular tuple on the unique port or on the duplicate port, or depending upon whether it was used for a time-based dedup on the expired port. So the concept for the expiry is that this is for an unbounded data set. So imagine you are reading data from some streaming source, and continuously this data is being pumped into the pipeline. However, even for deduplication of the data, there would be a limitation as to how long you could wait or how long a history one would want to maintain for someone to look for a deduplicate record. So there are certain keys that this operator would require, which has to be configured by the user. So one is the key expression, which is like the primary key for a particular tuple, which identifies the tuple as such. Second is a time expression, which basically, so in this case, our expiry key is a timestamp field. So there has to be a timestamp field in your tuple or in your data record, based on which we define the expiry. And then there is an expiry period for which the history is maintained by the deduper in the managed state. So this is how it actually works. Are there any questions at this point in time with respect to the dedup operator? So I'll just once again explain. We'll be having another detailed session on Monday, which is 19th, where this will be taken up in further detail. So there are two types of dedupe or deduplication of data covered over here. So one is a very basic type of dedupe where there is no concept of expiry of the data. So that is normally assumed to be done for a smaller set of data, where it's what we call as a bounded data set. In that case, we know that in one of these data sets, there will be the unique and the duplicate record available. Then there is another concept which is time-based dedupes, where we have a concept of an expiry uh, period and an expiry key. Here, it's for mostly for larger set of data, an unbounded data set where the data is continuously being played in Windows, in Apex. And in this stream of data, we identify the dedupe or rather the duplicate records based on what we receive as part of the history, which is defined by the time expression, which tells us which field is there in the tuple, which explains the expiry period as such. And there's another configuration field called expiry period, for which this history has to be maintained by this particular operator, after which if any record comes, it is declared as expired, which will not participate in the deduplication process. So there is a question on the LIFO and FIFO pump. So dedupe, what it ensures is it would maintain the order of the records while any of these two dedupe operations are happening, whether it's time-based or in the basic dedupe. It will ensure that the order of the tuples is maintained. So there's a question how to configure dedupe from time to spatial database. So as of now, this particular operator which is there in Malhar is basically time-based. So there is no mechanism as of now to convert that, but there is another operator which is part of what we call the make library, where there is a concept of categorical key as well. So there is no necessity over there to define a time-based key. So it could be on a categorical key as well. That's a separate library, but we'll definitely take this as a consideration. There's another question, can we revise a tuple whose time code has expired? Well, the assumption over here is based on the analysis of the data. A DevOps team is pretty well aware as to when an expired tuple would mostly come. So as per the configuration, we cannot go back and revise the tuple as such. You basically have to replay the data as such. There's no mechanism of revising the tuple. Once it is expired, we basically emit it on the port. Then it's entirely up to the user how they would like to reutilize that particular expired tuple. They may play it back into the pipeline, so it entirely depends on the business logic over there. So it seems there are no further questions. I hope we have been able to answer these two questions. So how would one actually utilize this dedupe operator in, let's say, a Kafka ETL kind of a scenario, which we saw earlier? So in this case, you see that this is another logical tag of an application where one is reading from a Kafka stream and giving it to, in the downstream, it is giving to a parser. This is actually a CSV parser, which then passes it on to the dedupe operator. So if you look at the dedupe operator closely, there are a few ports over there. So there's a deduplicate output port, which is marked as stream 8. If you look at stream 6, that's the expired output. And then there is an error part which we've added for this particular application. So in this scenario, what you see is this is the time-based dedupe where there is the concept of expiry. So in let's say certain business scenarios, one would not want to process a data which comes, let's say, a day late. So you could define a 24-hour period. So for the 24-hour, it would maintain the deduplication process, but after the 24-hour, it would emit it on this expired output port, so on stream 6. And then it's entirely up to the business user as to how they would want to look at this particular data. So in this case, the unique data is being then taken to the transform, it's transformed, it's formatted, and then written to the HDFS. So using Apex and some of these operators, you can easily build this kind of a pipeline. So we saw that we had an earlier pipeline which was without a dedupe, and it is very easy to just add this dedupe operator to the pipeline and just enhance your entire ETL. So normally, where do we see the utilization of this dedupe operator? So based on our experience, what we've seen at our clients and at our prospects and the POCs that we have done at the past, these are the three most common scenarios that we've noticed. So in terms of when it comes to data governance, so people are looking at removing duplicates from their master data. So this master data is built from multiple data sources as such. So in order to build this clean master data, one of the key aspects of this process is removing the duplicates. So imagine customer data that is coming from different sources, inventory data and so forth from different business scenarios. They tend to build up this master data, and in the process, different channels would give the same data. So it's, and looking at the volume and the rate at which this data comes, it's a very difficult situation in a DevOps scenario to remove these duplicates at that particular rate. So that's a challenge for most of the people that we've spoken with. In another scenario, when we are doing some kind of data reconciliation, so let's say if you are looking at data from different channels and you want to reconcile those channels, at times one of the challenges faced is that they want to make the data clean so that they remove all the duplicates and then they do the reconciliation to have a better understanding of that reconciliation of those data sources. The last part, what we normally see is, so once it is coming, so transaction records that are coming from different sources or different channels. So while you are processing those channels, it is immaterial, it is mandatory for businesses to ensure that they remove all the duplicate records to have a better sense of their data, to make better business sense of their data as such. So these are the three most common utilization of the dedupe operator that we have seen. So in terms of business cases, some of the common ones that we have seen. So in a telecom scenario, for example, if people are aware of this particular domain, so the calls that people make, which are generated as so-called CDRs or call detail records from different sources. One could come from the switch, from the SS7 signaling, from the probes that have been set, and there are some other sources as well, where you actually provide these call data records to different downstream applications. So one could be billing, some could be for reporting, and mediation is one source which actually converts many of these raw data into an ASCII format. So one of the main challenges for these systems is to remove these duplicate call data records, because as the call is happening, this data is cut while the call is happening, and it's possible that you might get similar call detail record from different channels as such. Again, if you look at the banking and the financial services sector, while generating a statement or while creating the statement, it's a very common practice to ensure that duplicate transaction records are removed while we are reconciling. When we are talking about know your customer kind of records, it is mandatory from a regulatory perspective to ensure that duplicates are removed or looked into, or especially when there's a loan application, for example. And in many of potential fraud scenarios, it has been noticed that people who are trying to do a proper fraudulent activity, they provide the same details again and again. They just make few changes here and there, so it's immaterial for people to look at these duplicate data records. In an ad tech world, one of the most common problems that they face is the duplicate log records that they get from different channels. So from different geographies, they might be getting the same set of data, and it's a hard time for them to remove, clean that particular data. So, and one part of the cleaning is removal of these duplicates. On the e-commerce side, when we look at the weblog data, again, it's a similar scenario as in the ad tech world, removal of duplicate logs for certain user IDs while they're trying to build the profile of those user IDs. So there is a question with respect to the data spread. So the question is, what if the data spreads every time zone? Shouldn't we wait for the latitudinal hours before we expire? Again, as I mentioned, for this particular operator, it's a good question. But what we are looking at is the event time of the. So we are expecting it's UTC based. We are not looking at different time zones as such. We would welcome if somebody could take this operator from Malhar and extend this operator and provide this kind of a solution. It would be great to have that kind of contribution. But one of the basic assumptions that we make is as the data is being played into the pipeline or into the DAG, it's maintaining the same time zone as such. If there are different, then we expect it to be converted from different to a common time zone. So we expect it to be on UTC as such. So that's the basic understanding. So I'll just move forward if there are no further questions. So why DataTorrent RTS? So when we look at these particular pipelines or this particular applications, however you would like to call it, DataTorrent RTS is required because of these particular reasons. A, it is powered by an open source Apache project, Apex, which has garnered a lot of interest. We have more than 60 contributors to the project. It's being looked at as one of the topmost projects in the ecosystem in the recent past. The entire processing of the data is in memory, so in that sense, it's a true streaming solution or a streaming engine. If you look at the Apex Malhar library, so these are all reusable components. So as we saw the Kafka ETL pipeline, we could easily take that particular pipeline and just introduce the Dedup operator in the pipeline. It is as simple as that. All you have to do is just take the Java package and introduce your own either custom operator or any operator from the Malhar library into the pipeline. It comes with a built-in fault tolerance, scalability. These are the two most talked aspects of the engine, which we have covered in our previous webinars where we talked about our engine. So in terms of built-in fault tolerance, we have a concept of checkpointing. So when you look at a particular pipeline, as we saw in the Kafka ETL, each of the operator basically is kind of a windowed operator as such. So based on the windowing concept, what we do is we do a time-based checkpointing of the state of the operator. So let's say there is a basic configuration. So I think the default is around 60 milliseconds or so. So every operator would go through this checkpointing state where it checkpoints the state of the operator, not the data, just the state of the operator on HDFS. And once every of these operators have gone through a particular window, we commit that particular state. And if there is a crash, if anything goes wrong with any of the operators as such, if anything goes wrong with the cluster, any of the nodes, the Apex engine has a built-in mechanism of bringing the application back from the last checkpointed state. In terms of scalability, what we are saying over here is so the applications can scale in or scale out depending upon the rate of the flow of data. So whether it's a streaming scenario or whether it is a batch scenario, the rate at which the data is available, the computation is happening, accordingly it can scale in and scale out. So there is a concept of static partitioning as well as dynamic partitioning that you can deploy to a particular application when you deploy it over a cluster. And we are talking about big clusters over here, so several hundred of nodes and some really big data being played through these pipelines. The ease of development and the reduced time to production that this particular platform allows. So you could basically take these Malhar components, you could just clearly go ahead on your IDE and create the entire application in no more than like just a couple of hours. So some application that would take 3 months, 6 months for people to develop can be done in a few hours time, and it's readily deployable. So if you have your cluster ready, you could just launch it on your cluster and try it out. And the support that we provide to the DevOps, so you could actually subscribe to our user forum or to the dev forum and paste your questions over there, and there is a good team which will actually respond back to your questions. So you get a full-time support for this particular platform over the open source community as such. So that's how it actually helps you out. So in terms of resources, these are some of the links people who are interested can look at the Apache Apex site, apex.apache.org. If you are interested in looking at the community or you'd like to contribute, please do subscribe to our forums of Apex as well as to our Google group for our AppHub templates. You could download our RTS from our website, datatorrent.com/download. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, write something about us, please feel free to do so. We conduct a lot of meetups around the globe as such, in the US, in our India office in Pune. And these webinars, these videos, you could find it on YouTube. The slides which we are providing today's session will be shared on SlideShare. We also have a unique concept of a startup accelerator package. Here, as per our definition of a startup, which is less than 10 million of revenue and has got funding of less than 30 to 50 million dollars, is viable for getting a startup accelerator license of Data Torrent RTS for a year for a non-production environment. So if someone is interested, please feel free to contact us. If you would like to try out some of our big data application templates, you could directly download it from our datatorrent.com site, or you could download the DataTorrent RTS 3.6 version, which has got the AppHub built into the platform. And we are hiring. So if there's someone out there who's interested in joining our fantastic team, there are some privileged people who are part of this team who have worked in likes of Yahoo, who are actually a part of the team who was involved in building Hadoop. And there are some really good guys over here. If you'd like to be part of our team, and we are doing some fantastic stuff over here, so you could write to us at jobs@datatorrent.com. We're looking for developers, architects, and so forth. Please feel free to send in your CV at jobs. So there is a question regarding our. There's a question. I guess what I'm trying to understand from this is how we are supported on the GitHub. So there is a GitHub repository for Apex as well as for Malhar. You could actually go to our website of Apex and look at the GitHub repository. That's how we support the project. If that's the question. So we'll be having another session on the deduplication of data. That will be a more hardcore technical session, which will be conducted on Monday, which is 19th. Those who are interested in more technical content, please do attend that particular session on Monday. So if there are any questions from the audience, please do paste your question on the question panel. We would love to answer. I think hello, am I speaking with Maniganda Prabhu? I think you raised your hand. Is there something that you would like to share with us? There is a question from the audience. Where is Apache Epix Hadoop most easily tested before deployment? So what you could do is, if you already have a cluster in place, then you could just take one of our application template on this AppHub and just deploy that. If that is not the scenario, we have a sandbox that can be downloaded from our website, DataTorrent.com, and you could just set up the single node kind of cluster over there and try out some of our app templates on the sandbox as such. If somebody would like to get in touch with me, I'm available at mohit@datatorrent.com. So I guess there are no further questions from the audience. So today's video as well as the slides will be available on YouTube and SlideShare. So if you again look back at the meetup page, the links will be made available on GoToWebinar as such. And we look forward to your participation in the upcoming webinars. So if anybody is interested again in looking at the Dedup operator in detail, there is an upcoming webinar which talks about Dedup in further detail on Monday, 19th of December. So once again, I would like to thank everybody for their time and their patience. I hope this was an informational session for everyone. I hope we've been able to answer most of the questions. If there are any further questions, please feel free to join our forums at users or at dev, and please feel free to paste, as well as if somebody is interested in contributing to our project, we'll be more than happy to have people on board. So thank you all. Have a good day. Thank you.